Clifton Powell was never the name in lights, but he was the face you never forgot. You saw him in Ray, in Friday, in Dead Presidents, Rush Hour, Next Friday, and over 100 other titles. He could be a gangster, a father, a preacher, or a crook, sometimes all in one movie. His delivery was sharp, his stare intimidating, and his emotional range limitless. Powell was one of Hollywood's go-to character actors, and for decades, he built a career most actors would kill for. But behind the scenes, his story was a hell of a lot messier. See, Clifton's journey didn't start in Beverly Hills. It started in the tough streets of Southeast Washington, D.C. He lost his mother when he was just 4 years old. His father, a man battling alcoholism who couldn't offer the safety or structure a kid needs. That kind of start doesn't just disappear when you make it. It stays with you, it shapes you. And for Powell, it planted a survival instinct that would drive his hustle, but also some of the demons he later fought in private. What's wild is how far he pushed himself despite those odds. His early days were all about staying out of trouble. He leaned on mentors, focused on school, and eventually found his way into acting, first on stage, then on screen. Once he broke through, he didn't stop. Powell wasn't the leading man in the tabloids, but he became the guy casting directors trusted to show up and deliver. If you needed a gritty scene to land, he was your man. And he didn't care if it was a small role, he made it count. But here's the thing about Hollywood, the camera doesn't capture what happens off set. It doesn't show you the contracts that vanish overnight, the stereotypes that box you in, or the personal storms that never make the gossip columns. For Clifton, the hits came from every angle. There were temptations, gambling, fast money, shallow friendships, and then there was the fallout. A marriage destroyed, a $5 million 0-cent divorce, children he admitted he wasn't present enough for. He once said being gone 50% of the time might have been manageable, but 70%? That tore his family apart. Still, it wasn't the casinos or the divorce that nearly ended everything. It was an accusation. One story, one moment, and suddenly the actor you saw in over 100 projects became that guy from that case. In 2011, a woman filed a complaint claiming an encounter with Powell turned non-consensual. The media went wild. TMZ headlines, tabloid frenzy. Powell denied everything from day one, but that didn't matter. In Hollywood, perception is reality. Even though the criminal case was dropped due to lack of evidence, the civil case dragged on for years. And while the courts never convicted him, public opinion did. Producers pulled out, casting calls dried up, appearances disappeared. Powell said one show that planned to feature him for 8 episodes cut him after just 2, not because of performance, just the stigma. And this is where the idea of a final sentence really hit, because Clifton Powell never saw a prison cell, but he was punished, not by a judge, but by an industry that moves fast and forgets even faster. Hollywood didn't wait for facts, it reacted to headlines. His story isn't just about guilt or innocence, it's about how easily a man's career, decades of work can collapse under the weight of an accusation. And how, even when you're cleared, the stain stays, especially when you're a black man in an industry that already treats you like you're disposable. But Clifton's story doesn't end there, because behind that fall, there's a bigger truth, one that exposes the way Hollywood really operates, and why Powell's story is bigger than just one actor. Clifton Powell didn't just face the court of law, he faced something far more ruthless, the court of public perception. In Hollywood, it only takes one headline to undo decades of grind, and Powell learned that the hard way. Even after his legal battle ended with no criminal charges, he wasn't walking back into the same industry. Studios had already made up their minds. Casting directors stopped calling. Networks quietly removed his name from projects. He wasn't blacklisted officially, but he may as well have been. One whisper in a producer's ear was enough to shut doors that had taken years to open. And behind all of this, a deeper, uglier layer. One that Powell began to speak about more openly: colorism. Not racism in the traditional sense, but a subtler version that ran deep through the entertainment industry. Powell talked about being told he was too dark for certain roles, not marketable enough, not relatable to mainstream audiences. It didn't matter that he had proven himself in dramas, comedies, action films, and biopics, it didn't matter that his performances brought rawness and authenticity to every role. What mattered was how his skin tone showed up on camera. Producers wanted charm, vulnerability, romance, and somewhere along the line, someone decided Powell's complexion didn't fit those boxes. Yet, he was welcomed with open arms to play gangsters, criminals, the dangerous roles that leaned into stereotypes. If they needed a character to intimidate, they called Powell. But if they needed a romantic lead or a sympathetic hero, suddenly he wasn't the right fit. That contradiction haunted his entire career. It was the same industry that applauded him for his performance in Ray, a role that earned him an NAACP Image Award nomination, but still wouldn't cast him in a love story. In Ray, Powell played Jeff Brown, Ray Charles' loyal road manager. He wasn't just a sidekick. He brought emotional weight, grounding the story with his performance. That nomination should have marked a turning point, but it didn't. The praise came, the recognition came, but the opportunities stayed stuck in the same lane. Powell wasn't blind to it. He saw how the system worked. He saw how light-skinned actors were pushed forward while darker-skinned ones had to fight harder just to be seen. And what hurt more was watching it happen within the Black entertainment community. He once called out director Spike Lee, not over personal beef, but over what he felt was unnecessary public criticism of another Black actor. Powell believed in solidarity. He believed that tearing each other down only helped the people already trying to keep them out. And that belief went beyond interviews. He lived it. Even during his most difficult years, Powell continued to mentor younger actors, speak at community events, and push for better representation. But all the while, he was carrying the weight of a system that had never truly embraced him. A system that profited from his talent, but never fully respected it. That kind of rejection eats at you. It makes you question your worth, your identity, your legacy. Powell wasn't just battling rumors or legal fights. He was fighting a culture that had boxed him in from the beginning. And once the scandal hit, that box became a cage. He knew the truth. Not all actors get to rebound. Some get written out silently, their absence explained away by creative direction or casting changes. But Powell had something a lot of people didn't. He had receipts, the work, the history, the evidence that he'd earned his spot. And now, all that history stood at a crossroads. Would Hollywood let him reclaim his space, or would it bury his legacy beneath whispers and forgotten credits? Clifton Powell had every reason to walk away. The betrayals, the cancellations, the silence from people who once called him family in the industry. Those wounds don't heal quickly, but instead of disappearing, he stayed visible. Not in the flashy, red carpet kind of way, but in the way that matters more, by showing up for his kids, for his community, and slowly for himself. It wasn't about fame anymore, it was about peace. He started rebuilding not just his finances, but his sense of identity outside the roles Hollywood gave him. The truth is, he had spent so long being that guy in films that people forgot there was a real man underneath. A man who'd grown up in chaos, who fought to avoid the same fate that swallowed so many of his friends. A man who took every job not just to rise, but to survive. And once the spotlight dimmed, he had to face what was left. For Powell, that meant confronting his own mistakes, something most celebrities never do. He admitted to gambling losses, to choosing work over family, to letting ego creep in when he should have been grounded. It was raw, uncomfortable, and brutally honest, but it was real. He talked about fake friends, the ones who only came around when the money was flowing, the ones who disappeared when his name hit the headlines for the wrong reasons, and he spoke about the loneliness that fame often hides. How he could be on the set of $1 million movie and still feel completely isolated. That kind of emptiness is what pushed him toward the casinos, toward women who didn't love him, toward distractions that numbed the pain. But there's a quiet strength in starting over. Powell began reconnecting with his children, repairing the emotional gaps left behind by years of absence. He didn't pretend it was easy. He knew an apology wasn't enough. But he made the effort, and over time that effort turned into healing. He stopped chasing the version of success that nearly destroyed him and started focusing on the kind that actually mattered. Being present, being accountable, being real. Hollywood didn't come running back, but that didn't stop him from working. Independent films, smaller projects, even voice work. Powell found ways to stay active. And what's wild is that fans never forgot him. They remembered Pinky from Next Friday, Jeff Brown from Ray, Cuddy from Dead Presidents. His performances lived on long after the headlines faded. He became proof that sometimes the work is the legacy, even when the industry tries to erase you. And here's what makes Powell's story hit different. He never played the victim. He acknowledged that life dealt him some unfair cards, but he also owned the ones he played wrong. He didn't need a redemption arc scripted by a PR team. He lived it quietly, day by day. When people ask what happened to Clifton Powell, the answer isn't simple. He wasn't taken out by scandal. He wasn't defeated by Hollywood politics. He was scarred, yes, but he wasn't broken. He's still here, still standing, still creating. And maybe that's the real lesson in all this, that survival isn't just about staying visible, it's about staying true. Powell could have faded out like so many others, but he didn't. Because the truth about Clifton Powell isn't in the courtroom, it's not in the tabloids. It's in the grit, the grind, and the grace of a man who refused to let Hollywood write his final chapter. He took the pen back, and he's still writing.